Welcome to the Guide, Not Guru podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Brock. My purpose is to empower women to create authentic, aligned, and abundant lives. After over a decade of mentoring women in business and self-leadership, I found that we don't need to adopt a guru's blueprint. We need guides to help us build our own. So if you're ready to lead and be a work in progress, you've come to the right place. Hello, my friends. We are in for a special treat today. We are having a conversation about how to navigate relationships during the holiday season. And I have brought one of my favorite people in the entire planet. She has been my coach. She is my friend. She has changed my life in so many ways. She's a certified trauma-informed somatic practitioner, Tiffany Mast, to talk to us about all the things that come up around relationships and boundaries and emotions and family as we think about getting together over the holiday season. So Tiff, I'm so happy you're here.
I know, me too. I'm just like, I keep making a heart. I'm so excited.
It's just so important. And, the holiday season is just important. We all desire to be connected. We desire to be together. And it's such a amazing celebratory time. And it can also be met just as equally with relationship dynamics, with conflict, with emotions, with lack of self-care. And so Tiffany and I wanted to really bring a conversation to bring all the listeners of Guide Not Guru just a little bit more support as you're walking into the holiday season. So Tiffany, tell everyone just a little bit more about you and why this work is important to you. And then we can just dive into some questions that pretty much I'm asking because we all need your help.
No, I'm super excited too and honored to get to pour into your community. So a little bit about me. I think this topic today is actually like very near and dear to me because it's something that I've struggled with for most of my life up until a few years ago. And so, for me, I've been able to take these different tools that I've gotten certified in and, embodied myself and get to now pour them into other people. And, that goes to what you already know about. So I have a tool that shows our nervous system's roadmap under stress and relationship, and that can be good stress too, not always bad.
Can you pause there for a second? Can you just say that again? What is this tool? Because it's actually a really cool tool.
Oh, yeah. So it's a science-based emotional intelligence assessment tool, which shows us how we basically internally made meaning of our experiences in our childhood and then big events throughout our lives that really shaped the lens through which we see and how we emotionally respond and physically respond in conflict and relationship to other people. And what makes that so powerful is that it actually, when you gain that awareness, which and I know, when we have that awareness of how we show up, it gives us more choice to be able to pivot and explore being in relationship, especially in conflict, in new, different ways that actually create more success the way that we desire.
I love that. And I know we'll speak more to that, but most of the women who are listening to this are working on themselves and their self-awareness. And so they're going, oh, I'm starting to see myself differently. And I know that that's a tool that's really helped you. I know I've been coached to it, and it's been an amazing tool for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So sorry, I interrupted you. Continue. Why is this work important to you? I just was like, sometimes Tiff is one of my best friends in real life. And sometimes she says big words really fast. And I'm like, hold on, slow down. Explain that, because what she is doing in her work is really helping us to better understand ourselves in all the different modalities that she does that. But at some point, we're not educated even on the language of emotions, or that, oh, these feelings I feel every time I'm with my parents or in my family dynamic, like, oh, this is not me. It's a pattern I learned. And so you might find that sometimes I'll pause, Tiffany, because I remember being almost, I felt like dense. I was like, what are you saying to me? But I was not, I just was uneducated. And so that is the first piece, is that education and self-empowerment so that we can better understand ourselves. So we hope to do a little bit of that today too.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you. Cause I'm like, it's funny. I'm so many layers deep and nerd out on this stuff so many times. So it's good to bring me back so that people can digest it even better, so that it does support them on their journey even more. But yeah, essentially, like, who I am different from any other like general life or leadership coach, in that Kelly already knows this. I tend to coach more to your emotional body and your physical body first than the words that are coming out of your mouth. And the reason that's important is because a lot of the learning that we do growing up, and I say learning in quotations for those who can't see the video, is actually pre-verbal. And so we're learning through our emotional body and our physical being, which houses our nervous system. And so oftentimes, we are physically and emotionally unconsciously in motion before our conscious brain becomes aware. So it could be like in previous holiday seasons where you're like, why do I want to throw this turkey leg at Aunt Sue? If there's an Aunt Sue, I'm really sorry. I'm sure she's a lovely human. That's because our body is getting activated and triggered first. And so the power of awareness, again, to your point, Kelly, is this empowerment of we get to respond versus react. And it more awareness, not just in our cognitive or intellectual mind, but more awareness in our relationship to our emotions and our physical body and how it's tending to react, gives us more response flexibility. So when you think about responsibility, it's the ability to respond better. So that's kind of the core of what I do through that tool, but also somatic practices, which is the mind-body connection, breath work, and nervous system regulation as well.
And we got to talk about all of these things, because if you are headed into the holidays, walking back into homes or gatherings of relationships where you are not the same person as you used to be, and you've been changing, our nervous system, our body, everything is responding probably right now, even as you're anticipating going to be with, your family and friends. And so again, going back, Tiffany, we want to be connected. We want to be in great relationship with the people who, we're with over the holiday season, but sometimes that's not there. So,
yeah,
a couple of questions that have come up for me and for the women who have been reaching out is, as we start to do more conscious and self-awareness work, we realize we've changed and we're walking back maybe into a house that we grew up in, where we can find ourselves feeling frustrated with our loved ones that have not changed, or they've stayed the same, but we want to change our patterns. And we don't want to step back into, for me, the middle child sister who I've always been, who has this role to play. Talk to me about the roles that we play in family, and like how we can be proactive to not get triggered back into the younger version of ourselves that like somehow shows up when we're not aware.
Yeah, I love these questions, and there's so many things I want to say. So I'm actually going to start with maybe the more unconventional response first, which is you're probably going to get triggered. And so it's what's your relationship to yourself in that moment when it happens, especially when we're on the journey. And I can remember like when I was fresh into it for the first couple of years, I want to say that again. Even with all of the quote intellectual knowledge I had of, okay, I know I tend to feel tightness in my chest here. My heart rate goes up. The story I tell myself is like, I suck, or I'm probably going to make them mad if I don't do X, Y, and Z. Even with all that awareness, I still would get triggered. It might not be like as intense, or it may be that you're able to like manage it better in one moment than the other. And so the foundation of all of this, that like if anybody takes anything away from the conversation today, is take any moment that you're finding yourself activated as an invitation to meet yourself in a new way at a deeper depth.
Give me an example.
So for me, when I think about the first few years of my own awareness journey and going back into, like, I was raised by my grandmother. So going back into my grandmother's home, or my aunt and uncle's home were actually, even though it was a great environment with my aunt and uncle, the years that I was connected with them were some of the deepest trauma that I experienced. Keep in mind that your environment is going to influence your nervous system and your body. So again, even if you intellectually know, like, I'm a different person and I've been in this healing journey, your body may walk into that environment of like, oh my gosh, the last time that we were here, XYZ happened, or we were experiencing XYZ thing. And that's because our emotional reaction in the moment doesn't know that it's like, 34-year-old Tiffany. It thinks that it's like 10-year-old Tiffany that had those things happen. So the number one step is I would take those moments to observe myself and be like, I'm safe. I see you and I love you. And there's nothing inherently wrong with you. And so honestly, like the first year or two, I would watch myself fall into my old pattern. Maybe not completely, but I would watch myself go to like, what do I need to do to make them happy, or to make sure that Uncle so-and-so doesn't, I don't ruffle his feathers or like piss him off because I disagree politically or religiously. And so it was that I had to choose to pivot, because my old way of patterning would be to shame myself even more. Like, why did you do that? Like, why did you go to appease him? Like, you're losing your boundary. Like, you need to, like, you have this awareness. Why can't you like stand up for yourself? So instead of approaching it mentally that way, I began to pivot. And that's what changed everything, is I pivoted into, wow, I see that there's still some parts of you that are feeling this need for attachment in this moment. And so what I'm going to do is choose to not abandon you, like abandon me.
Right. Talking to yourself. You're not talking to someone else. You're saying this to yourself.
Yeah. So like, okay, Tiffany, like I see you, I'm feeling like the shakiness in your voice, or the, like even talking about it, I'm like feeling some residual, because that's also the thing to keep in mind. When you've had more intense trauma, the visceral reaction can be more intense. And that doesn't mean that you're broken or that you're not like as far along on your healing journey, whatever that means. I don't know why we put milestones on our healing. But it's like, oh, there's something here that like my body is really responding to. So let me take this moment to let her know that she's safe. Let her know that I see her and I love her. And even if there's a moment where I witness her fall back either fully or partially into an old pattern, that doesn't mean that I don't have, like you've said before, like you can quote win the next moment. So I met myself in this moment, which is winning, even if how I wanted to respond didn't look the way that I desired outwardly. At least internally, I responded differently. So then the next moment, because you're going to have many moments throughout that holiday, you're then able to kind of test out, because you build that confidence first in meeting yourself differently internally. So then you can begin to see what does being more confident in meeting others differently in conflict look like, which can be like, hey, I hear you. I don't necessarily see it the same way, and I'm okay with that. So I would literally respond like that to someone.
Say it again.
And I would say, I hear you. I can appreciate that perspective. I don't necessarily see it the exact same way, and I'm okay with that. Like, I respect where you're at, and just like reiterating. And so, or with other people that tended to have like a less aggressive response, I would start with like, can you tell me a little bit more by what you mean when you say you think this is good? Because even down to like language, again, words are important. So how somebody else defines what is good is different than how we define it. So you think about pumpkin pie, what I define as really good in pumpkin pie might be like a gingerbread crust instead of like a regular graham cracker one. And like, it's mainly Cool Whip with some pumpkin pie in there. Whereas somebody else's definition of a good pumpkin pie might be the graham cracker crust. It might be no Cool Whip. It might be actually like pecans or something on top, which I'm not a fan of, but I'm not going to tell them that their like experience of pumpkin pie is wrong, because that's what they desire. So, so even when you're finding yourself not in agreement, or somebody's making the same comment about how they see you, be like, that's really interesting. I'm curious. I'd love to understand what your thinking is behind that. So I think, A, meeting yourself differently internally, and then B, if you can invite yourself to get curious more about what the other person is saying. Because I think, especially when we're in relationships for a long time, we presume we know how they're processing.
So good.
Have we ever actually asked them? Have we ever actually asked Aunt Sue or Uncle Brian, like, or our mom or in-laws, what do you mean when you say blank? Can you tell me a little bit more about
Can we pause there, Tiff? Because
yeah.
even that, I want you to give the example in just a moment that we often talk about, but that I'm getting triggered because I actually think I know how you see me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm emotionally already going, I'm not the middle child anymore, or I'm not your little girl, or I'm not that way anymore. And my trigger or our triggers will show up in these rising emotions, and
Yeah.
we're already making meaning of it,
Mm-hmm.
which could be accurate, most likely not. And so one of the best things we can do is exactly what Tiffany was just saying. Help me understand. I'm curious. And this is if you're wanting to engage in that conversation, but Tiff, will you give a little bit of example of perspective? Because we're all looking at the same family dynamic, and yet we all have very different experiences of each other. And if we think our experience is right and the true one, we're missing the mark. So help us with perspective a little bit.
Yeah. The first thing I want to say is that your experience is true. The emotions that are coming up, it is true for you in that moment. And so it's about stepping into curiosity. And I think like a healthy challenging of, does this need to be what it always is for me? And when we get to challenge what our experience is for us, even by that shift of what I was saying, by meeting yourself in the moment, from like shame to like our capacity to witness ourselves falling into old patterns is just as powerful as our capacity in witnessing ourselves when we shift the way we desire, because it's giving us the ability to hold the range of like how we show up in life, and know it's not like a good, bad, right, wrong. It's we're all in this experiment and the experience of life. And so to go to your point about the perspective piece, it's the cheeseburger, which you brought up in the last episode. So I learned this from my mentor, Corey. She threw a cheeseburger up on the screen. It was like a really juicy cheeseburger, at least how I would label it, with just imagine like a really thick, juicy bun with some seasoning and stuff in it, and like melty, ooey gooey cheddar cheese, like thick tomatoes, fresh lettuce, maybe like some mayonnaise, mustard, whatever you like, and some like thick sesame seed buns. And so we're all looking at the same image, and you're probably wondering like, what the hell does a cheeseburger have to do with perspective? But it's essentially, we can all, like, if we ask people, like, what do they see and what do they think of? Everybody would have a different response. So I just described all the things that I saw. There have been points where I've shown this in other groups and somebody pointed out, like, are those beets on top of it? Which I never even noticed. And then I was like, that's disgusting. I would never put beets on my burger. But this other person was very excited about it. And it could be like, if there's a vegan or vegetarian, they're hoping that that is not real meat, that it's plant-based. Some people could be having like very emotional reactions. Like, I was just drooling. Actually, I just had to swallow because I was drooling, thinking about how good this cheeseburger probably was. Whereas again, like if the vegan is seeing, like it's meat and not plant-based, they're going to have a completely different emotional reaction. And so it's understanding that we can all be looking at this universal image, but having a very different story that we're telling ourselves, emotional response, and like visceral, physical response to that image as well. And it's not just applicable to cheeseburgers. It's when you walk into the holidays. So when your family, or when you think about Thanksgiving and what that means, there's already like a bulleted list of like the presumed expectations of who does what. Like we make the turkey, this person makes the cranberry sauce, this person makes this pie, this person makes the green bean casserole because that's what they're known for. And so when you think about if you were to show up with like a totally different side that everybody else expects you to, they're going to obviously have some sort of response because we're used to like doing this dance and everybody just kind of like falls into place. And so it's how do you use language in a way that's connective in those moments to bring them along, to know that bringing a different side isn't a sign of you wanting to like say deuces and walk out of family gathering, it's actually, hey, there's like a different flavor of an experience that I want to bring here.
Oh my gosh, can I speak to this? Because this was actually very personal to my family. My
Yeah.
family has grown up with very traditional Thanksgiving food, like green bean casserole and
Yeah.
the pumpkin pie and the roasted turkey. And when I got married to Josh, he was like, I'm going to be honest, I don't really like any of the Thanksgiving food. And I was like, I'm going to be honest, I really don't either. We started eating really healthy, and I was like, I don't like any of that food. And so I remember saying to my family, we were like, doing that thing. Okay, who's bringing the apple casserole, cranberry apple casserole, and who's bringing the turkey and who's bringing the rolls and all the stuff. And I said, hey, I think we're going to bring ribs and chicken.
Yes.
And I think we said, we'll do our own roasted vegetables. And everyone was like, interesting. But I remember actually having a conversation with my family. They were like, you don't like this? And I was like, I've never liked it. I just didn't know I had an option to bring anything else. Like I always knew I was going to have to eat food I did not enjoy on Thanksgiving. So I lived with this dynamic. And Josh is someone who is so like, oh, this is me. I'm like, I'm not offended. I hope you're not either. And if you are, I'm okay with that also. Like he's so self-assured. And so when we got married, he was just like, yeah, I don't want to eat that. I'll grill my own chicken and bring it. And so I learned this ability to say, no, we still want to come to dinner. We still want to be here. We just are eating differently, and that's okay with us. But I remember my family like just being like, oh, interesting. And I remember my mom and dad like being like, we never knew. And I was like, I didn't know I could say anything. So it was just interesting. I had lived 30 years eating food that I just didn't know. It was like, well, this is just what we do. And so I love that idea of there was something in me that would, even as small as the food, hey, this is what's good for me. I know I usually bring this thing. If anyone else wants to make it, great. But I'm going to bring a couple of dishes that serve me, especially since I have so many gut issues. It's like, I can't eat your Brussels sprouts anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to pull on that as well for the listeners that are thinking about, bringing their new them and all the new awareness into the holiday season, especially if this is your first holiday, bringing new you, maybe start out with something like a side. Maybe it's not having the conversation around the religious or the political beliefs or something else that like on a scale of 1 to 10 is more like on the 5 or more side of that feeling of intensity. So then that way this is where like slow and steady is the best way to go, because this is like your nervous system. So it may sound like we're talking about, to your point, Kelly, we're talking about, do I want the green bean casserole or do I want to bring my own ribs? But that's still your nervous system is learning, if I bring the ribs, am I going to be rejected and abandoned in these relationships? Because our family unit is where our attachment style, where our nervous system learned to be safe and survive. So to go back into those relationships and repattern is going to feel more uncomfortable than like a friendship or a colleague or somebody we randomly meet on the street. So pick like a lower level thing that's on like 1 to 3, where you can start to repattern and teach yourself in that moment, like, no, look, I am safe and having a different desire in this moment, and I can still be connected in the relationship. Because the other part is of what you said, people will surprise you. We make meaning of what we think people are thinking of us. And then on the other side of that, we also presume what we think the reaction is going to be. And you got like interesting. And what I can think of with like most of my other clients is they're actually finding that like communicating and starting with these lower level items, teaching their nervous system, hey, we can be safe here, and building that confidence and self-trust, is they can then walk their way up to like these bigger, I guess what you would say, conflicts, or where you're not meeting eye to eye. But use it and use like, I'm going to, so like, for example, I'm going to be bringing actually a healthy side to a traditional Thanksgiving for one of my friends' families this year. And so it's when you walk in the door, or even before then, being like, I'm enough, like I'm going to honor myself and be proud of me for bringing this part of my new me into the sauce. And it's okay if somebody else has their opinion or judgment. Like, I'm not responsible for the words that come out of their mouth or the perceived meaning I think that they're making. Like, what if you challenged it into, maybe they're now thinking about, you know what, actually, I don't like green bean casserole either. I wonder what I could bring differently next year, instead of thinking that they're judging you, that something is wrong, that you're bringing something different. Like, there's so many different ways to play around with that, I think.
Yeah, there's so much there. And I just want to drive that idea home because it can feel so sensitive when we are doing our own personal awareness work and we're realizing usually the places that we feel now the most unsafe is the places that we always were, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you've known this version of me and I'm now different. And we can feel like hesitant to even be around these people. And I love that idea of just these small ways that you can show I'm shifting and to find out I'm still safe, and or find out you have safety within yourself. Like, maybe they did reject you. Maybe they did have a problem, but you saying, you know what they think about me has nothing to do with how I feel about myself. But learning that you'll survive those little differences that really we can heighten when we worry about them, when we anticipate them ahead of time. And so, you don't have to go in and let grandma know that you've had a religious change, like, I haven't seen you, like,
yeah.
And that's something that is interesting. It comes up often at these holiday like gatherings with family and friends, is big conversations, politics, religion, the world, all of these things that can be so divisive. So how do we deflect topics that will not lead to productive conversations?
Okay. I always love this question, and I've gotten it several times so far the past few months, actually. So the first thing I'm going to say is sometimes it's not about deflecting. Like, how much of wanting to deflect is you avoiding stepping into a repatterning that's necessary? And the caveat I want to say with this is, if it's like a legitimate toxic relationship, like narcissistic, if you're going to get gaslit or anything like that, then by all means, I would say go ahead and deflect. There's more to that, but I'll just stay with that part. But yeah, the first piece is, and this is from learned experience, I deflected a lot the first few years. And where it got me was more out of alignment, and it cost me my authenticity.
Wow.
I was still attached. I was still in relationship, but it was costing me literally, like, being in alignment with who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up. Because part of the deflection, for me at least, was this fawn response. Like, how do I make sure, again, that I keep like the cool, I keep everything copacetic and okay, so that I don't get rejected. And it was because I wasn't using that opportunity, which I ended up doing later. I also have a unique situation because I'm more on the anyways, we won't get into that. But I was abandoning myself in those moments. I was rejecting myself in those moments by not entering into the conversation. And when I say to not deflect, it's not about going all in, but maybe in that moment, instead of however you may typically respond, which is changing the subject or not saying anything at all, or snapping. There's a variety of ways that people can respond. Like, maybe it's, I can appreciate that your perspective is different from mine, and I'm okay with that. Because I've also seen, it's like, I appreciate that your perspective on this is different from mine, and I respect that. Or like, I'm okay with that. I mean, I've literally said to people, like, I don't need you to think the same thing as me for me to be in a relationship with you.
Wow. But but so many times we think we do have to agree.
Right.
Because I feel like I need to feel safe knowing you agree the same thing, or I used to, right? I used to, we all have to agree the same thing in order to feel safe. And what I'm finding is, hey, you can look at that same cheeseburger and see something different. And I'm okay. Like, I'm okay because I found the way that I like to eat or how I feel about this cheeseburger, and it's settled with me. But I think we have to agree in order to feel safe in relationship. And it's just not the case. Like, I really want to drive that home because I thought I do need there to be peace and ease in order for us. So that means I need to be agreeable.
Mm.
And to just find out that disagreeing does not mean I don't still want to be here.
Right.
That's just all it is. We're just disagreeing. We're just having a different point of perspective. And, you know, I would really love for that to land with those of you who are listening. Can you be okay with your point of view and accepting that someone else, like, I think sometimes we also want to victimize ourselves and blame other people. They're just not okay with me, but there's something about us that's not okay with them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Especially when we get our new perspectives of life. It's like, well, when I started doing emotional work with you, and I was like, started to see actually the lack of consciousness in my friends and family around me. And I was like, well, let me educate you on what you don't see about yourself. It's like I became this like conscious savior to them. And like, that is not my responsibility. My responsibility. But do you get what I'm saying? Like sometimes we start growing and we're like, you're just not seeing this thing on you that I can now see now. And it is not your job to change someone else's perspective.
Yeah. Well, and who's to say that our what we perceive as our higher level of consciousness is a better interpretation for them and how they need to show up in their lives.
For sure.
You know? Sure. And so I think the biggest thing that I had to learn for myself was, like I said, like meeting myself in those moments and choosing to witness myself in a new way from a place of love versus like shame-based awareness that we're taught in society. And then on the other hand, like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to actually expand my capacity to hold like a wider spectrum of different beliefs, because I'm robbing myself of more learning, not just learning on an intellectual level, but I'm also robbing myself of learning what it means to be in relationship to other people, like through emotional experiences, through my physical body. And so my ability to meet myself and then stay connected, even when there's disagreement, actually expands the depth at which you can be connected in relationships. So I've seen a lot of my lifelong friendships get deeper and deeper and deeper over the years because I've chosen to open my mouth to share, hey, here's how I'm seeing things. I'd really love to hear more about like how you're interpreting, and I'm okay if we don't, like literally languaging. I don't need you to think or see this the same way as me. My purpose in sharing this is because I want you to hear my perspective, and that helps me feel more connected to you. And honestly, like now I've got friends that have complete opposite, like religious and like political beliefs. And they now say to me, I know, like I'm sharing this thing and I know that like yours is X and you don't need like us to like see eye to eye, but now they're mirroring back that same language essentially. And so, you know, I think it's just really important to remember, use your words. Like we're taught to use your words, but actually use that like anxiety, use that shame, use that frustration to like communicate out in a new way, to say, hey, here's what's happening for me inside. Here's how I'm seeing this. I'm really curious to hear what your perspective is. And it's all coming from because I love you and I want to stay in relationship to you.
That though, here's what's happening for me. Here's how I'm feeling. Here's how I'm seeing the world. So you're owning, not there's one truth. It is here's my experience, and I'm curious how this is showing up for you.
Yeah.
And letting their feelings, their perspective, their experience be good. You know, the minute we really sabotage ourselves with self-growth is when we think when we've grown to new learning, we think we found a new truth. Like I finally found it. I found the truth. Like that will be the thing that it takes you down, is you thinking you now know something to be true for good. And so, you know, I often say this again, even here at this moment in time, because I'm recording something right now that in 5 days from now, 5 minutes from now, I could have an experience that totally changes my perspective. So I'm constantly saying, you know, at this moment in time, what I believe, at this moment in time, how I see things, at this moment in time, because I actually want to give myself space to say, I'm willing and open, and I'm counting on the fact that I'm going to change my mind again. And so even for the women who are listening, who have really shifted some things. Don't even hold so tightly to your new views of the world, because they are not your end all truth. Like, stay open to what else could be true. It's one of my favorite questions. What else might be true here?
Mm-hmm.
This happened to me actually this morning with Josh, and we were talking about something about taking my son to school, and had this moment of conflict. Rainer was like, "Are you guys squabbling?" And I said, "Where did you learn the word squabble?" And he said, "Bluey." And I was like, "Okay." But I said, "Yes, we're squabbling." I said, "But we'll work it out." I said, "We're just having a conversation." My point is, I, in that moment, had an emotional response to my husband, who I love so much. But in that moment, I was feeling all my own triggers and thinking, he's selfish, he's all these things. Gave it an hour of space, calmed myself down, and I asked myself the question, what else might be true here?
Mm-hmm.
Beyond my perspective of what just happened in the kitchen, what else might be true here? And I was able to ask him to say, help me understand what was coming up for you.
Yeah.
Help me understand what you were feeling. And all of a sudden he was able to say to me, babe, from my perspective,
Yes.
from my experience. Yeah, we're using all our great language. But he said, I felt this, I saw this. It feels like you don't see me in this way. And I was able to actually be the one to ask for an apology. And if you had asked me an hour earlier, I would have told you about all the ways I was right and all the ways he was wrong. So my point in sharing even that experience is, you all, we desire connection with each other. Mm-hmm. And if by me being right means you're wrong, no, I don't want to be right. I want to get it right. I want to get it right with the people I'm in relationship with, which means I want to understand. Help me understand how you felt and saw and experienced. And then I don't have to be so offended. By the way, I'm going to rant on this because it's a life lesson I've been learning. I felt so, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So when Tiffany is talking about actually, why don't you stand up for yourself a little bit? That's a lesson I've had to learn, because I will actually just kind of lean back and it's fine. Let's don't invite the conflict. And then I would never really say what I needed to say or how I really feel. And if I did, I would go off defensively because I needed so desperately to be understood.
Yeah.
And so what I found is when I first try to understand other people, or like Tiffany just said, hey, this is what's coming up for me. I'd like to understand what was happening for you. All of a sudden, I've watched all of the conflicts, all of the arguments, all of the disagreements or the tension lower down, because it's saying, I'm going to share my view of this, but I'm equally as interested in hearing what this was like for you. And all of a sudden, the walls of defense go down.
Yeah.
Maybe not totally, but they certainly lessen. And then we have potential. We have possibility for real conversations and real understanding of each other.
Yeah. And if there gets to a point, back to that original question of how do I deflect? There's going to be times where other people are going to push back and not be as receptive, and that's okay. That's normal. And so it's tuning into those moments and then communicating again, hey, I'm noticing that maybe we're not able to meet eye to eye. Again, I'm okay with that. I would love to be able to experience the rest of our time together in our relationship in a different way, however that is, more connective, however you want to word that. Would love to pivot the conversation into hearing more about how your kids are doing with X, or how you've been doing with your job, or whatever it is. And so it's also okay to step into curiosity and explore navigating these conversations in new ways. And when you hit another road bump, again, which is normal, because we can influence how other people respond, but we can't control it. You know, we can influence by stepping into it from a lens of curiosity versus defendedness, and also pivot in those moments and then just language and say, hey, I'm noticing that, there's call it out, call the thing out. Oftentimes that's what we're missing. We're just trying to pivot in conversation, but we're not acknowledging what's actually causing the disruption. Yeah. And so call it, be woo, wow, we're both like feeling some things here. And, I'm pretty sure that like how I want to experience this conversation with you and the rest of Thanksgiving is, like some more joy and connection. So I'd really love to pivot the conversation into, blank, and maybe we can revisit that at a later date.
So what do we do here? So this is an example that's happened with me. Sitting down, having a family dinner, playing cards after you've eaten the turkey, whatever it is. Yeah. And all of a sudden this topic of big debate around politics comes up, and you know that it's like history has proven there's going to be some heightened like levels of emotions and defensiveness here. What if I don't want to be a part of that conversation? What do we do, Tiff? Like, I don't want to sit at the dinner table. Like, I actually do not want to sit here and spend my life and my energy talking about this. What do we say?
Yeah. So I'm going to pull a statement from Corey again. One of the things that she shared with me that's helped a lot for me, and then some of my clients, has been saying like, hey, I'm interested in being in conversation. I'm not interested in being in conversation around X. I'd really love to talk about XYZ topics. Does that sound like something that we could all explore doing this time differently? And then see what they say. And I think that's like, the boundaries piece. Boundaries is the way that we honor ourselves, and boundaries comes again from like communicating differently in those moments. But also like, what's the boundary after? So if they don't agree to that, then what is your boundary? Like, what does that look like? Is that like, okay, like I can appreciate again that this is something you all enjoy talking about, but I really need to honor my energy in this season. I'll just use you as an example.
Yes, keep me as an
saying
example.
This is going to be you. But like I've got like literally limited energy on a physiological level. And so what this is going to look like is I might come sit and be around you for a few minutes and then go out periodically, because that's what I need to honor. And I want to be in a relationship, but I know what my capacity is for today. Thank you for understanding. So instead of saying I'm sorry too, that's like the other big piece. Like when you're in these conversations, instead of saying I'm sorry, I don't have the energy, or I'm sorry, I don't want to communicate about this, it's like, thank you for understanding. I really appreciate you respecting my need in this moment. So
don't say I'm sorry. Say thank you for understanding this is what's important to me right now, or thank you for understanding this is what's happening for me right now.
Yeah, I appreciate you're giving me space, or I appreciate your flexing in, as I like move in and out of the room or whatever it is.
So what happens when they kick back and they're like, oh, you can't handle this conversation, or, oh, you always leave, or what, like what happens? Cause we know that people kick back when you don't get back into the regular relationship dynamic. That happens. How can we respond and hold a new boundary?
First is, how are you going to respond to yourself internally in that moment? Because my guess is for a lot of people, when they get the kickback, there's going to be like a myriad of stories of like, something is wrong with me, or like, see, I can't stand up for myself, or like, oh my God, this feels so overwhelming and uncomfortable. And instead be like, whoo, yeah, this, this Kelly about me, like that's literally how I talk to myself. And internally, sometimes I say it out loud, but internally I'll be like, dang, she is feeling the things in this moment. And that's okay. That's like the main thing I tell myself, like, it's okay. Like, repatterning can be messy again, especially when you're in your family relationships, because that's where your nervous system learned to be safe and survive. And so choosing authenticity over attachment in that moment feels really effing uncomfortable. There is no like perfection. And it's saying like, hey, if that's what you choose to make meaning of what I just shared, that's okay. I'm going to step out. And again, thank you for respecting and honoring like what I need in this moment.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, don't meet them with where they're at. Meet them again with honoring yourself, because again, remembering your nervous system is going back to like little Kelly, and all of us as kids, we're going to choose attachment over authenticity.
Meaning define attachment.
Yeah. So when we're babies, we need our caregivers to be alive. Right. And so we're going to choose to as you say, like bend and fold to how we need in
Mm-hmm.
that moment. So if we learn that expressing sadness or anger is inappropriate, we're going to learn to suppress that or not disagree with somebody else's opinion in order to be in a relationship, because at a primal level we need like shelter, food, and to be cared for. And at a nervous system level, our body's like, we need these caregivers to protect us, because if we're solo out in the world, we're going to get eaten by the bear or the T-Rex. And so understanding that those moments where you're like, oh gosh, they're not seeing me, they're not agreeing with what my ask is, at a primal level, it's like, again, teaching yourself not to abandon you and that you're safe in being authentic. So even if, being authentic in the past meant that there would be some like rejection or abandonment, doesn't mean that that's going to happen now. So that's why I said pick the side dish before you full on like pick these other conversations. And so, just pause there.
I love that. And I want to speak to that because, Tiff, what you're saying is like absolute gold if you can retain it. And when I was first beginning this work, I was not self-aware enough to even have access to that response in my mind. Like it wasn't there for me. In the moment of my trigger, I would immediately shortness of breath, all my symptoms would show up, rage would show up or defensiveness or whatever. And I would like 5 minutes later be like, dang, I did it again. Like I defaulted right back into this pattern. And so one thing I want to share with anyone who's listening to this is like, if you're going like, this is a good idea, but how do I do that? Because our body really does respond before our mind has access to that information. So I'm already fighting, flighting, fawning, freezing. I'm already doing it without even knowing it's happening. And so one of the things that helped serve me in the beginning was when I notice, well, first of all, I would ask you to just like write down, what are some of your normal symptoms of negative feelings? Like what happens in your body first? Even having awareness that, and I didn't have it at first, y'all. Tiffany would look at me and she's like, I noticed that you're breathing shallow. I'm like, I am. I had no idea that she was like, you haven't taken a breath like in like 5 seconds. I'm like, oh, you're right. Like, oh my gosh. Like, so maybe sit with yourself for a moment and just say, what are some of the things that happen in my body when I feel overwhelmed, when I feel stressed, when I feel triggered? Maybe even mentally imagine yourself in that situation and then scan your body. Like I'm feeling it right now. Just even imagining the story I was thinking of, my body's already responding. And so noticing your trigger symptoms in your body, and you can speak to this, Tiff, but this was like what helped me. I had to kind of name what happens in my body. And then I noticed, okay, when I'm feeling shortness of breath, a little lightheaded, I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's almost like I feel heat on my chest. I knew I was about to go unconscious. I was about to go into a reactionary response. And so what I started doing was I would say, I need a pause. I just need a minute. I need a pause. And I would go walk outside in my neighborhood for like 90 seconds. And I call it now the precious pause. I would take a pause because I'm not self-aware enough or practiced enough to even help myself in those unconscious responses yet. So I would just say, hey, I just think I need a minute. And I remember Josh or my family being like, where are you going? I'm like, I just need to get some air real quick. And I would walk outside and I would take a breath and I would say, what am I feeling? And then I would start naming my emotions. I would start saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling pissed. I'm feeling upset. I'm feeling defensive. And I would literally name all of my feelings. I'm feeling. And then I would say, what do I need right now? And I would say, I need a walk. I need to walk, not just a minute and a half. I need 5 minutes. Like I need to walk. Or I would be like, I think I just need a hug. or I need to just say, I can't be a part of this conversation. All of a sudden, my nervous system wasn't overriding my mind anymore. I was allowing it to calm down enough for me to get some conscious thoughts to say, I need to not be playing cards and talking about politics anymore.
Yeah.
I need to exit the conversation. And then I would say, how can I give that to myself? And so I remember consciously walking back in, and I remember my family being like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I just needed a minute. I felt emotional being in this conversation. I was able to just say that. And I needed a few minutes. And, if we're going to keep talking politics, I don't think I want to play the game anymore. And that's okay. Just let me know when you guys are done. And all of a sudden they'd be like, oh, we're sorry. It got heated, or it brought them to consciousness too. So I don't know, Tiff, what do you have to say? Any other tips to that? Because I was not conscious of these, even the great things I could have heard on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have those in the moment ready and available because I was already reacting. So for me, taking space to get conscious and saying, what am I feeling? What do I need? And how can I help myself? I had that actually on a note in my phone, that every time I got triggered by something, I would walk, I would breathe, and I would ask those 3 questions. And then it would help me have conscious next best step. So what would you add to that?
Yeah, no, it's really beautiful, and I love that, and it makes me so proud because I do remember where, like, that one conversation the first time I was like, I have not seen you breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is your relationship to your emotions changed first before all of that, and so it's recognizing our emotions are not bad. Like, when we say, hey, I notice I'm getting emotional, that's actually amazing. So the next time you're like, hey, I'm getting emotional, either internally or expressing it to somebody else, like, sweet, amazing. I'm listening to a part of myself that I maybe wasn't listening to before. It's a good thing. And that also helps other people reframe. So I just want to add that part in where I've literally said, hey, I noticed that I'm feeling some emotions come up, which is great because it's telling me, hey, here's what I want to experience more of, or hey, here's what I want to experience less of in this moment to other people. And then they're like, oh, just like you said, it gives them a new awareness that they didn't have before. And then the other part is, again, you're going to have listeners on here that are in different parts of their journey. So especially if they're in the beginning, it may be, like I had said before, being able to witness yourself in old patterns and not shame yourself in that space and say, oh, it's happening in this moment, and actually use this holiday season as this new you going into it for the first time to observe. And just like you were saying, Kelly, maybe make some mental notes or step away to the bathroom and put it in the notes app on your phone and be like, hey, I noticed that my chest felt like X, or my heart rate went up, or my jaw got really tight, or my back felt scrunched. Because to your point, a lot, we're not aware usually in the beginning. And there's even times now, 7 years in, where I'm still having to do that. So I'm still going to walk into this holiday season because I go to friends' houses and I go to my family that I'm still in a relationship with, their house, and I still step in with curiosity. What am I going to learn new about myself? Because I know I still don't have quote, all the awareness. And so, so it's stepping in, using this space as curiosity and having compassion for yourself. And then on the other end, anytime that you can drop into your breath, into your body, if you notice, even if you're mid conversation, and just like Kelly said, I need to step away for a moment, or I need to just say, I need to go use the bathroom. There's nothing wrong with that. I have definitely escaped to the bathroom many a time. And just deep breaths. So 4-7-8 breathing is one of the most powerful things. So breathe in your nose for 4. And then hold for up to 7 if you can. And then exhale out of your mouth for 8. Bonus points if you do it audibly, because that actually activates your vagus nerve to help you go into that rest and digest in your nervous system. And do it about 6 times. And if people ask you what that noise was when you're in the bathroom, be like, I was taking some breaths. Or going outside, or even a butterfly hug. So doing really slow and meeting yourself in that moment. about 8 times, just like alternating again while you're like dropping into your breath. Those are some like key things that I would say, but it's, to your point about getting it right to be in connection, like getting it right, that repatterning looks really messy. And so I think giving ourselves permission to, to let it be wonky, and know that in all of the wonkiness, there's tons of learning for us and for other people. And so a lot of what you'll go through is going to inform new conversations that you can have outside of Thanksgiving dinner, outside of the holiday season. That's something that I talk about a lot is, if you're not able to communicate in the moments of conflict, just reflect on it and take all the learnings that you've had and then think through using when you're outside of conflict, when you have those moments when you're really great energy of connection with other people, how to like gently bring up these things that you noticed before with people. And then, oftentimes those people will be more open to exploring something different after.
I love that. And I love these tiny little practices like breath and feet in the ground and tapping yourself that again is this nervous system response that allows you to get safe and more conscious so that then you can have a more responsible response rather than reactionary. Tiffany, I remember you giving me this example one time of you saying, I want you to imagine you're in conflict or you're in an argument with this other person. And you told me to go up in a hot air balloon.
Oh, yeah.
Above me and this other person. I remember you saying, do you want to stay in this relationship? You made me lift myself out of it. Mm-hmm. And do you want to stay in relationship with this person? And for sometimes I've been like, no, I actually don't care. And so I was able to use that awareness of being like, if I lose this person, like, why am I bending to fit? Like, why am I even trying to negotiate? I actually don't care. But other times I've been like, yes. And so after that hot air balloon moment of saying, I really do want to preserve this connection. After we're in that hot air balloon, what do we do next to help ourselves of saying, yes, this is a relationship I do value?
Yeah.
Where do we go next?
I think it depends on like the dynamics. You think intentionally for a moment. So I would say the first thing to go to is like, what are you actually accountable to in that moment versus the other person?
Tell me more. Or give us an example, maybe.
Example. Well, I think it goes to, again, if we think about these like hot topics that do tend to come up over the turkey leg, is like, you're not responsible or accountable to the meaning somebody else is making or the reaction they're having to the words that you're saying. But what you are accountable to is how you want to meet yourself in that moment and not abandon yourself in the conversation and relationship, and how you want to respond differently to them. And so, if you can't find words, if you're like more at the beginning and you don't have words, maybe it is like, just thank you for sharing your perspective. I can appreciate it, the end, because maybe you're not even at a space where you can say, I can appreciate it's different from mine. But I think it's also, there's a lot of times where I've just literally verbalized, I'm not really sure how to get the words out that I would like to. So know that my intent and whatever I'm getting ready to say is coming from a place of like, I want to be in relationship to you. And it's not a personal rejection of you. It's that I'm in process of learning how to show up differently for me in my own journey that I've been on in the background. So thank you for, the space and grace. And then just blabbed out. That might also be the ADHDer in me. But yeah, so I think anytime that you can just be real with other people to the degree that you feel safe, that's where you're honoring your authenticity and you're reteaching your nervous system that you can be safe in a new way. But it does take a relative degree of safety to be vulnerable. And what I mean by vulnerable is saying, hey, not really sure if the words that are getting ready to come out of my mouth are, exactly how I'd like them. So here's my intent behind them. That's some of the most powerful, like, pre-phrasing that I've ever used.
I love that.
Yeah. And I often bring humor into it. Like, if people have seen, my brain just went blank, but the movie with, is it Chris Rock? And you know what I'm talking about, where he's like,
yeah, I don't understand the words coming out of your mouth. Jackie Chan.
I'll be like, okay, what's happening in my mind right now? Because and I'll frame it in, I'm so excited to, like, hear more about what you're thinking and share more about where I'm at. So I'll reframe my, like, terror and anxiety that's happening internally. And I'm like, I'm so excited that my brain is, like, going to, that movie where it's like, nobody understands the words that are coming out of your mouth. You might experience that in this moment, and know my intent in sharing or asking questions is because I want to understand more, to be in deeper connection with you. That like, people love that. So I think, we put a lot of weight into the holiday season. So another aspect is, like, how can you bring that lightness and that humor where possible?
I love that. And, I want to kind of switch gears for a second, because you and I are both highly sensitive people.
Oh, yeah.
And, there's this really cool, it was like enlightening for both of us to find out. You can go to HSPperson or hsperson.com, and there's like a self-assessment you can take to find out if you are a highly sensitive person. And what that means is you're just taking in information through your senses, very empathetic. You're feeling things, experiencing the world around you from a high sensational place at all times. And so I remember, for me, I'm one of 4 kids. We all now have spouses. There's like 20,000 children between us, So when we get together, I would find myself feeling anxious to be together with the people I actually want to be together with. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I really understood, like, oh, I'm taking in a lot of energy, a lot of emotions, a lot of sensations are going on around me. And I started just really thinking proactively about being together with people during the holiday season, because what I didn't do well in the beginning was I avoided. I would just, like, back out, because I was just like, I don't know, somehow I'm always overwhelmed. I'm emotionally exhausted. And so I would, like, avoid. And yet I always wanted to be together. Was that similar with you?
Yeah. That's exactly what I used to do before too.
Yeah. It's like, I want to be together. I feel FOMO by being left out, but somehow every time I'm together, I feel worse. Mm-hmm. And it's because I actually wasn't just caring for myself during our togetherness time. And so I would love to share just a couple of practices I've done, Tiff. I would love to hear some of the things you've done to help yourself, because there are a lot of people who might just be like, oh, I just need to care for myself better during this season. So, for example, this year we're getting together over Christmas with my family. And like I said, there's like 20,000 of us that get together. And I want to be together. But some of the things that have helped me is by not staying in the same house as my family members. Because if I can never get away, I never have a turn off alone time. And I really recharge by having some alone time. So we have this year a different house than all the nieces and nephews and the family members, so that I can have my recharging alone time. And then I can come and be present, be together. And if you all know me, when I'm present, I'm totally present. And so I think that's actually why it wipes me out, because I give my all when I'm with someone.
Yeah.
So even just the physical distancing, to have the option of, like, I'm going to separate and leave. When we used to stay together, I would go on walks by myself, and people were like, oh, I'll go on a walk with you. I was like, I actually am just going to walk for a few minutes by myself, but I'll loop it back around and maybe we can pick it up together. But I really just needed this emptying out of time by myself. I found that for me, a practice of just my morning routine grounds me. Like my cup of coffee, my book, my meditation, my prayer time. It's like, that is filling my cup before I'm ever, extending to other people, and really protecting that and asking for the understanding and the boundaries from my family members, because they'd be like, why aren't you here yet? Or my husband would be like, hey, I have the kids. Like, are you coming out? But when I was able to say, hey, can I have 15 minutes? And then even to Josh, I would be like, when do you need some time alone? I'd love to take it this morning. When can you do it? Because I didn't even want to assume that they didn't need that too. So some of those little protective things that help me feel filled up and also help me to empty out people's energy. So what comes up for you, Tiff, around people?
I'm loving all of this because I'm the same as well. And when I first started out, also a avoider, because I was so scared of rejection was my main avoiding, like how much am I going to upset somebody else if I ask for this thing? And so now what I do and what I've actually shared with a lot of clients that's helped them too, even if they're not like highly sensitive, if there's somebody who's just really anxious, is have pre-conversations. So before the day, like don't put it off. And actually you can use these pre-conversations. Like if on the phone feels too uncomfortable, do it as text. And that's still like honoring your nervous system. Like I said, on the scale of 1 to 10, like it's a 1 or 2 to inch it forward. Like go ahead and have text like, hey, super excited to see you for the holiday, like whichever it is. I just wanted to let you know, if you see me like walk out periodically for like 5 minutes, it's just so I can go reset myself so that I can continue to be present throughout the day in a way that works for me really well. So having those pre-conversations, either text or over the phone, if that feels too uncomfortable, if you're not going to see them in person. And again, that's like bringing people along. I think, oftentimes we make up this story in our head of like how they're going to respond or what's going to happen. And it's a matter of like being honest. And again, not saying I'm sorry, coming at it from an angle of thank you so much for like respecting this is what I need so I can continue to like be in relationship and enjoy you all with the energy like that's needed. And then on that day, remind them, because when we're doing your practices, just because you tell one person, you tell them one time doesn't mean it's going to stick. In my previous job, my boss used to say drip, drip, drip. Like people need to hear something at least like 6 to 8 times, sometimes 20 before it sticks. And that's again, because we get used to our patterns. And so knowing that when people either forget or they make a comment, it's not coming from a place of like being malicious on purpose. It's probably because they're genuinely forgetting because this is a new practice that they're not used to you doing. And so being like, hey, you remember, like I sent you the text, here's what I like need to do. And so I think the walk is great. Anytime, again, like the bathroom is your savior. So if you can't get a different house, like the bathroom, get some good headphones, yoga nidra, like YouTube, any like 10, 15 minute yoga nidra that can like help reset your nervous system. And dropping into your breath, even if it's cold outside, getting your feet in the grass. I love my human planting. I'm trying to think of anything else in there.
Something I've said to add to that, Tiff, is I've said something to the effect of something I'm learning about myself lately is that I really respond well to little breaks. So it's like same thing. It's not asking for permission. Something I'm learning about myself lately is that I really recharge by taking time alone. So just wanted to give you a heads up if this is something that I'm doing, or it just makes it so much lighter. It's more like, hey, I'm keeping you in the loop of something I'm knowing about me so that you understand, because I care about our understanding and relationship together. And so I love that. Talk to me. Anything else you would add on tips? Being highly sensitive, empathetic, anything around that?
Well, I was just thinking of myself. So with the family I'm in relationship now, I've already let them know, like, hey, I found out this new thing. Are you open to hearing me share about it? And I let them know, like, I'm highly sensitive, and inevitably people are like, what does that mean? And so then I just let them know that my capacity is X, but now on top of like these health issues that we've both been navigating, which is just like hilarious and ironic. So now I'm communicating even to people that are like coming into town wanting to meet me, because, it's not just like the family gathering. I don't know about you guys, but I have a really like huge friend group. And so now that I've moved back to my hometown, everybody's like, oh, she's home. So I've had to be like, yes, I am also so excited that I am home too. Here's what's happening in my health. And I don't give them all the details, but I'm like, basically, like I just said this yesterday, I just found out my mitochondria is not doing what it's supposed to do, which means I literally don't have the energy of like a normal human being. And it's still really important for me to spend time with you. So what I know my like energy capacity is in a day is like, I can come have dinner for 2 hours and then my battery's probably going to die. And I want you to know that's not a result of like, I don't love you, but it's literally my body is just tapped out right now. How does that sound for you? And they were like, oh my gosh, I totally understand like whatever you need. Whereas like previous me would have been like, oh my gosh, how do I just make this work? How many energy drinks do I need to drink? Murdering my adrenal glands, like not helping my body. So I think the other piece is, outside of family stuff, like really sitting back and thinking about what is your capacity? How do you want to experience the holidays?
Yeah.
Like what would feel good for you? While also being mindful of the impact on other people and then asking for that.
Well, and I think that's so important too, because we have family and friends who there might be some things that us sharing invites other people to share back about themselves. It's like, wow, now there's this open line of communication. So, a lot of times when we get together for the holidays, it's like there are expectations of schedules and expectations of people, and just sharing, what are some of the things that you need? And then asking, what do you need? What's coming up? How can I better honor you? Thank you for hearing how I'm trying to honor myself. How can I better honor you? And it's like,
100%.
Yeah. And so around scheduling, you might say like, wow, here's all these friends who want to see me. I'm thinking I'm going to have coffee on this date and time at this place. If you're available, if not, maybe we can make it happen next time, but like not bending always to meet other people's needs. We are the only ones who will honor ourselves. And so we've got to get clear on what that honoring looks like. We don't want to be recovering from the holidays. We want to be supporting ourselves, be connecting, be rejuvenating, creating relationship. And so I think there's this very proactive piece of, number one, what do I want to experience this holiday season? What do I want to feel? Are there things I want to do? Like I'm going to the beach to see my family. Hey, while I'm here, something that feels important to me is X. I would love to make that happen if that's possible. What do you want to make happen while we're all here together? It's like, let's kind of collaborate and also understand everybody else might have other needs that we get to be in better relationship with too.
Yeah. And I think the last thing that I definitely want to add to all of this is, give yourself permission to witness yourself from a place of love and compassion versus that shame-based awareness, and use the holiday container time as a way to learn more about you and other people, to get curious around what is happening in my relationship dynamics to myself and these other human beings. Then also, how am I intentionally taking time to be in my body and my breath, regulate my nervous system so that I have the capacity to like keep moving forward. And then on top of that, saying, my brain just blanked. Welcome to Health Issues 101. Short-term memory. What was the last thing I was going to say? So I was talking about observing yourself, dropping into your body and your breath.
Boundaries.
Well, there it is, y'all. So
well, listen, this is the perfect opportunity actually to say that it'll probably come to her consciousness in 2 seconds.
Oh, that's what it is.
She'll,
yes. Yeah, you're going to feel tired. Repatterning is exhausting.
Hold on.
Because you're literally teaching your your brain, your nervous system, your body, your emotional body to show up in a new, authentic, and aligned way. So even choosing authenticity and alignment over like our old attachment patterns, if they haven't been serving us, you're going to feel tired. So don't take feeling exhausted as like you're doing something wrong, because it takes energy to create a new way of being. So what me saying that is make sure you're hydrated, drink some electrolytes, take these pauses like Kelly was saying that she's really great at intentionally doing now, even if it's for 90 seconds, stepping outside and taking 3 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. And that'll help build that resiliency and that capacity within you. And also know that if you're feeling wiped and you're like, dang, like I feel really tired, know that it's because you're choosing to be a new observer, to show up in a new way. And that's normal. And you're not always going to be that exhausted.
I would like to add to that, because I did not know how exhausting it was going to be. Like to change, period.
Yeah.
You know, what's actually happening is like the version of us that we've been that has held a certain amount of energy is breaking down. We're literally actively saying, I'm going to crush this boulder that I always said was me. And so that's energy to break it down. And then there's new energy to rebuild this version of ourselves. Hello, it's costing you energy. And so be so compassionate with yourself if you're feeling extra tired as you're showing up as her. As we often say here, this new version of you, you're not wrong for feeling tired. It should be anticipated and compassionately held, because it takes energy to be her for the first time. And to add to what Tiffany said is it won't always cost you that same amount of energy to be her again. Like there are things that I am now constantly doing by default that the first time I did it, it was all I could do to say what I really felt. It was all I could do to step outside. It was all I could do to say, I don't want to participate in this conversation. And I was exhausted. And now it's just like, I don't think I want to, sit here for this conversation if it's going to continue. And like, it's no big deal. I'm not expending that energy. So have grace and compassion for yourself, during this season.
Yeah, for
sure. And Tiff, tonight or tomorrow night,
night,
when you're listening to this, it will be Tuesday night. And when this podcast will drop, tell them about, this class that you're leading, if they're really wanting to hear more about this from you.
Yeah. So tomorrow, which will be tonight when they're listening to it, Tuesday, the 22nd of November at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, I decided to hold a free masterclass to just equip people with some really foundational skills that we've talked about here, to help them feel more empowered and confident in stepping into the holiday season. Because I know a lot of people have been asking questions and like feeling anxiety around, like, how do I have this conversation? What do I do when, this person says this thing or this issue comes up? And so I'm going to just teach some very foundational skill sets and practices that I've mentioned here, but then also leave time for Q&A. So a few people can ask in real time. And then that way, everybody else that attends can also learn from how I'm mirroring back. Well, here's one idea or one approach that you can experiment with. So that will be that. Yeah.
I highly, highly recommend everybody tune into that masterclass, because what she's teaching is not just holiday. It just happens to be this is about how to show up in relationship with other people, which is what we want to continue to do.
Yeah.
So Tiff, what are some of the other ways that people can follow you or find out about your work in the world?
Yeah. So they can follow me on Instagram at TiffMast, TiffMast. And DM me. I have a link tree in there so that they can schedule a 15-minute chat if they're interested in learning more. And I have a few free resources on there as well. So they can find me there.
I'm so glad. And, just a quick shout out to Tiffany. The work that I've done in self-awareness and understanding my emotions and my body, it has been life-changing for me. So definitely follow her, reach out, get to understand yourself better, because there's so much wisdom and power in understanding yourself. Like you said, Tiffany, we can affect people, but we can't change them. Yeah. But what we can change is ourselves. And so when you take your life into your responsibility. Say, I don't want to keep reacting. I want to be responsible. We're able to show up so differently in our world, and especially navigate the holiday season, which we want to be one. You know, I do have one last question that feels important around grief during the holiday season, just holding grief. So before we just end, if someone's navigating loss and grief during this season, do you have any tips on how they can hold space for themselves?
Yeah. So I love grief, which will probably sound quite strange to other people, and I'm okay with that. I would have thought they were strange. So I love it because every emotion has information in the gift. You've heard me say this like a million times. And grief comes from, you know, if we think about emotions as buckets, like under this bucket of sadness. And when we dial up or dial down, meaning when we access more of or suppress more of certain emotions, there's even more information. So oftentimes what happens is when we suppress our sadness, it can turn into grief. And this is important to know because the information in sadness is that there's been a loss. So this can either be a loss of someone or something. So if it's the holiday season and you've lost a loved one, or it could also be, for me in the past, it was a loss of how I thought I was going to experience the holiday season with my family relationships. Because what most people don't know is that I walked away from my entire family except for one uncle and his wife. And so for the past few years, I moved through grief in a way that I met myself and actually deepened relationships with other people. And so I took that information and sadness of like, oh, I've had this loss here. And the gift of it was sensitivity. So being more fully alive to life, even the painful parts of life, and the deeper meaning of sadness, i.e. grief, is that it tells us what's really meaningful to us in our lives, what we want to experience more of and what we want to experience less of. And so what I learned in my grief was that I wanted to experience less of being rejected and feeling like I was small and insignificant. And what I wanted to experience more of was being connected in relationships, eating the turkey dinner around people that loved to joke around and wanted to see me, like truly see me, not see me masked as an ADHDer, not see me masked like in my trauma, like how do I people please here? And so I intentionally thought about where are the relationships where I can fully be seen, and how do I, in my grief, because often grief makes us want to hide and be small and like withdraw. And so I actually had to like challenge that part of myself, which was really uncomfortable, and put myself in those relationships. So I reached out to those people, which were all my friends and my one uncle and his wife. And I, again, vocalized like, hey, here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I'm experiencing. Here's what I'm noticing I'm needing in this holiday season. So whether it was to grab the cup of coffee with, you know, the one friend, or now it's just ingrained. So like this Thanksgiving, on Thanksgiving, I'm actually going with one of my best friends I've known since middle school to her husband's family's Thanksgiving. And then I'll spend my Thanksgiving on Friday with family. So I think intentionally looking at reaching out, you know, instead of withdrawing, reminding yourself that you're safe and being witnessed, and witnessing yourself and that pain, and knowing that that's a part of you. It's not your whole, you know, and that there are other parts, even if it's like your little toe that feels warm, like there are other parts of you that still have capacity to feel joy and connection to life. And finding that joy and connection in the holiday season doesn't mean that we have to neglect or shove away the pain of loss. You can hold them all. Yep. Yeah. So I think, being really intentional, asking yourself, you know, what are the resources that you need? So like you're saying, your morning routine, you know, maybe it's spending a little bit longer in your morning routine, maybe journaling the way, you know, what is it that makes the holiday season so meaningful, and how are you intentionally putting that in, and how do you need to meet yourself in those moments as well? Because it is about, you've heard me say it's the wealth of life, you know, is in relationship. It's relationship to us and then others at the same time, because that's how we heal, is those two together. So that's what I would say with that.
I love the not bypassing the grief, not bypassing the sadness. It's here. It gets to be expressed. And also having that doesn't mean you can't hold joy and also connection and love and awe and bliss and all of the other things. So it's not wrong. There's an honoring of what's here. And so finding a way to hold space for both. So thank you. I wanted to address that because I knew that was coming up for this in this season for a lot of people. So
and can I share one more thing?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Or thank you. Not sorry.
Thank you.
Just so people can hear in real time, you can like pivot. How that sounds for me and has sounded in the past is literally talking out loud to myself. Like, I see you in a mirror. Look in the mirror. Most powerful thing I've ever done is like witnessing myself, not just when I'm feeling great and amazing and empowered, also witnessing myself when I'm in like the deepest throes of like pain and grief. So if you can give yourself permission to look in a mirror, and if that feels too uncomfortable, that's okay too. But literally like putting my hand on my chest and saying everything out that I'm feeling. And so like, I see you, Tiffany. I know you're feeling blank. You're feeling like rejected by your family, like you don't matter. You're feeling the loss of how you see everything show up in the Hallmark movies. And it's really painful that you feel like you're not experiencing that in your way. And I choose to see you and love you in this moment. Like I choose to not abandon you. I choose to not reject you like you've learned. And once you get through it, you're going to cry, and that's great. Tears are beautiful. They have stress hormones. So it's the way your body releases and regulates. And then choose to say, and here's how I'm going to choose to continue to not abandon you, to like meet you, to be with you. Like you're safe in creating a new, like your own Hallmark movie or whatever it is. Like you're safe to be connected in relationship with other people's families that actually, you know, will bring more beauty and joy. Like there's nothing wrong with you because it doesn't fit an XYZ box that society has said. So that's like, you always want me to share real examples. And so that's the most powerful thing that has gotten me through the past few years. And especially when I walked away from my family, meeting myself literally mirror to mirror, eye to eye, tell Tiffany, like every time, like, hey, you're worthy of being seen, even with all of the puffy eyeballs and mascara raccoon look going on right now. Like I see you and you're worthy, and I'm not going to leave you in this moment, even if you felt left by somebody else. Yeah.
That's so incredible. Well, thank you for being on, Tiff. I know that this is going to be an episode lots of people come back to. And I'm just going to be honest, this will be the first of many times I have Tiffany on here. She has so much to bring us in our human experience. So Tiffany, thank you for being one of my guides in the world and being a guide to so many other people. And for everyone listening, don't hesitate to reach out to Tiffany online and let us know in the DMs, like how this resonated, how you applied any of these pieces to your life and to your family and to your personal experience. So can't wait to have you back, Tiff.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being such a gift to me and my life as well.
Always.
All right.
Bye-bye. Hey, friend. Thank you for listening. My goal is to empower as many women as possible. If this episode supported you in any way, I would love it if you'd leave me a review or let me know on Instagram. You can take a screenshot or tag me or just shoot me a DM. If you're looking for any kind of additional support, don't hesitate to reach out. See you here next Tuesday.